Welcome to The Logic of It All, a conversation on Christianity's search for a Reformation with your host, Reverend Gary Essex Sprunger.
Hello. Glad you could sit in on the conversation. The last time we were together, we were discussing the origin of sin and how the ancients of our faith believed in the legend of Adam and Eve eating an apple from the tree of knowledge, and that sin was a result of going against the will of God. Which begged the question, what is the will of God? How do we know what the will of God is? There are a number of people in the Bible not going against the will of God, but we will only converse about a few. And we cannot forget the ancients reasoned that if you followed the will of God, you would be rewarded. Let's start with a well-known story about Noah. But since you know it, let's approach it another way. Now, don't be shocked when you hear that there are stories of great floods existing around the world, resulting from the wickedness of people who come to an end. And then there's a new generation that comes out of the catastrophe. The myths do not seem to be related, each country having its own version, but with many similarities. Like those myths, the conditions around Noah was a world that was very wicked. So bad, the ancients told the story. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. God sounds pretty mad in this story, that he's going to take it out on the animals and birds as well. Fortunate for Noah, described as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, he walked with God and found favor in the eyes of the Lord. The narrative in Genesis repeats how corrupt the earth had become, full of violence, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth, so make yourself an ark. And he goes on with the dimensions, etc. In this story, God is so mad, he's even going to destroy the earth. Noah is directed to go on board when the ark is finished. And the ancients used two numbers that are used elsewhere in Scripture. God is going to make it rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And Noah is to take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, male and its mate, 2 of the unclean animals, male and its mate, and also 7 of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their kind alive throughout the earth. And Noah has 7 days to get it done. All these creatures from all over the earth, because God was going to wipe out from the face of the earth every living creature that he had made. Well, first of all, scientifically, zoologists will tell you that even traveling by jet, you cannot come close to gathering every animal or bird from all the earth. And secondly, veterinarians say, as huge as the ark is, there's not enough room for the animals, let alone the food for 40 days, not to mention their waste. Noah and the ark is a myth. Just like the Garden of Eden was a compilation of 3 legends, the story of Noah has 2 that are woven together. Biblical scholars identify the earliest source as J, Yahwistic, and the other as P, priestly, which is post-exilic, the time they spent captured in Babylon. This is seen in the use of Yahweh, God, and Lord interchangeably. And in the earlier source, the ark was already built. And the P source had Noah building the ark. The J source has the time of the rainfall and flood as 40 days. And the P source, 150 days of rain and water gushing up out of the earth, and the entire flood lasting a year. There are a few other discrepancies, but suffice it to say, there are two variations of the theme intertwined to make it one story. Earlier, I said there were other flood myths around the world, but one country's story is of interest and may help explain the two sources in the Noah story. The P source is after their exile in Babylon, which had its own flood story. And their two versions are particularly preserved in tablets with cuneiform writing, wedge-shaped. That was cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks, dating back 3,000 years BCE to Mesopotamia. The tablet heroes are pious men, receiving divine warning, detailed instructions on building a boat. One had to tear down his house to build a 3-story ark. Both are to repopulate the world, for the flood is worldwide. Both conduct acts of worship after the flood and receive divine blessing. When Noah exits the ark to worship, he receives God's blessing to go forth and multiply, with God's promise to never destroy the earth again by flood, and as a sign of that covenant, he sets in the sky a rainbow as a sign of the covenant between God and all life on earth. Noah receives the reward for following the will of God. That is what we take from the ancients and their story of the flood that happened because of the wickedness of the world. Scientifically, geologists and archaeologists have found no evidence of a worldwide flood ever in our history of life. Flood stories are not in Africa, occasionally just local in Europe and Asia. Our ancients saw the wickedness around them and used the myths of the flood, possibly one happening in the river system of the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, to call attention to what happens because of the wickedness from living lives not following the will of God. Now we can go back in history even further to where there are no found tablets of cuneiform recording the events. And that would be the story of Abraham, the patriarch of the Hebrew faith. We have to rely on the work of how the biblical scholars unraveled it and put it all together to know what happened as we search for an answer to how do we know the will of God. There are many stories about Abraham woven together. The earliest call him Abram, and then he becomes Abraham when God promises he will become the father of a multitude of nations. His nomadic wanderings with his family to many countries began as the ancients wrote. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you unto a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Quite a send-off. Is this how we know the will of God, a direct command from God, as the ancients wrote? Abraham will become the patriarch of the Hebrews. he left Haran and wandered around Canaan. The ancients wrote that in whatever land he was in, Abram built an altar to worship God, who visited him, promising him that the land would be given to his descendants for his faithfulness. Building altars to God and worshiping there constituted a claim on the land. His roaming took him to Egypt, and because his wife Sarah was beautiful, Abraham told her to say she was his sister, because Abraham feared the Pharaoh would kill him and take Sarah as a wife. The Pharaoh did take Sarah, and God struck the Pharaoh and his family with a terrible disease. And the Pharaoh was outraged with Abraham for saying she was his sister when she was his wife, and sent them packing out of the country. Beautiful as she was, Sarah was barren and not able to bear any children for Abraham. Each time God had said a land would belong to his descendants, Abraham was promised he would be greatly rewarded with countless children and have a long line of descendants. Sarah laughed at this, and it was testing Abraham's faith in God's promises. But he still remained faithful, building altars and worshiping God. They settled in Canaan. After some years, Sarah, wanting a family for her husband, thought about her Egyptian maidservant, Hagar, and so told Abraham to sleep with her maidservant so she could have a family through her. He did, and she gave birth to a son Abram called Ishmael. Hagar had been visited by an angel of the Lord who told her her son would have descendants that will be too many to count. Some accounts say he will be the patriarch of 12 tribes, and that the Ishmaelites later become identified as the Arab nations. Biblical scholars do say both Abraham and Ishmael were the patriarchs of their people. As the ancients wrote later, the Lord was good with his promise, and Sarah became pregnant and delivered their son Isaac. And later the Lord told Abraham that through his son Isaac, his offspring would be reckoned, and not to worry about the son by the maidservant, Ishmael. He will become a nation also, as he is your offspring. Now we get to the story of Abraham's faith being tested. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." And when they got there, Isaac was carrying the wood, and Abraham was carrying the fire and a knife. As they went along, Isaac said, "Father, the fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And they went on together until they reached the spot God had told him about. He built an altar, laid the wood on it, bound up Isaac, and placed him on the altar. He then took the knife to slay his son, when an angel appeared and told him not to harm the boy. Quote, "Now I know you fear God, because you did not withhold from me your son, your only son." End quote. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket, and sacrificed that lamb as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham was assured by the Lord as a voice from heaven that he would be blessed with descendants as numerous as the stars and the sands on the seashore. His descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. Abraham followed the will of God and was rewarded. There may be more to this story than the testing of Abraham's faith. Some biblical scholars believe it has just as much to do as a command to end child sacrifice. Abraham had been living in countries where archaeologists have found evidence of such practices, to mythological gods in the graves containing numerous bones of young children. It's interesting to note that throughout the scriptures, Old Testament and New, the stories by the ancients contain the presence of angels or a band of angels and a voice from heaven to accent the importance of what was happening in the story. To believe the stories as truth can be misleading for what we can expect in life today. Many think that if they have a good life, they live a good life in their faith, they will be rewarded. And when the reward isn't there, they lose their faith. They expect the reward during their lifetime, as it happened in the writings of the ancients. Christianity is weak today. 85% of those believing themselves to be Christians are not involved with their faith at the time when Christianity and Christian morality is being attacked by those who have no belief in God. One can see in the news every day the results of immorality, what was experienced by our ancients. We cannot take the descriptions of their legends and myths as truth, but we can certainly see they were attempting to address the problems caused by the sinfulness in the world. Are we doing the same, or are we repeating the stories of the ancients as truth, expecting that to change the behavior that certainly cannot be the actions of those following the will of God? Maybe we cannot know the will of God, but we can sure see what it is not the will of God. Our conversations are little steps, one step at a time, laying the foundation that hopefully will lead to a reformation of Christianity. Because as we can see, as Christianity is being taught today, it is certainly not working in a world that's in a terrible way. So many views and practices seem upside down from being what should be normal. So far in our conversations, we have been told the will of God through stories, using an appearance of the Lord, giving a command, visitation by angels, or a voice from heaven. When next we get together, maybe we should talk about humans making proclamations, claiming their words are the will of God. Next time, which we're out of now, and the coffee's cold. Have a good rest of your day and sunshine tomorrow.
You have been in conversation reviewing Judeo-Christian scripture with scientific knowledge to begin the foundation for Christianity's Reformation. Your joining in is appreciated, and you are invited to follow for much, much more of the logic of it all.